Relief was still 5 minutes out when Chapel Junction started to fail. The boarders had already taken the freight spindle, burned 3 docking collars, and cracked half the south barracks open to vacuum. I was on the inner ring, the armoured belt of corridors around Terminus Station's dead trade gate, trying to keep them away from the 2 places I could not afford to lose. The medical deck, where our wounded and Commander Victor Shaw were crowded under failing lights, and the memorial chapel, where 200 civilians were sheltering behind carved stone and old faith. "Seal the west door," I told Sergeant Nate Collins. Collins slapped the release panel. The blast door began to descend with stubborn hydraulic slowness. He was my senior squad leader, broad through the shoulders, iron grey at the temples, 12 years on station security. My father had trusted him before I wore a uniform. I trusted him now with the kind of trust that gets built in bad corridors over long time and never needs saying out loud. Gunfire snapped from the bend ahead, not the ragged panic of raiders. Controlled bursts, covering pairs. Men who knew how to move under pressure and keep moving when the first plan went bad. A body hit the deck in a spray of sparks, slid through the junction, and stopped at my boots. He wore old Navy armour under scorched boarding webbing. 7th Kettering Marines. The unit patch was one I knew from memorial services and founding day recitations, and the wall in the chapel 3 corridors back. Lost with all hands 31 years earlier. His visor had cracked across one side. Blood ran into one eye. A cutter charge was still clamped in one hand. I kicked the detonator grip away, dropped to one knee, and put my sidearm against the seam at his throat. "Challenge," he said. The voice was raw with blood and effort. I knew it anyway. The station archive played it every year with the Convoy loss roll. "Name and ship." He blinked hard, trying to force focus through pain. "Corporal Leonard Porter, 7th Kettering Marines. Attached destroyer, Banning." His chest hitched. "Where is Lieutenant Shaw?" "Not Commander Shaw, Lieutenant Shaw. Behind me." Collins stopped moving. I kept the pistol steady. "Lieutenant Owen Standish, Station Internal Security. Shaw commands Terminus now. He has not been a lieutenant in more than 30 years. Porter stared at me as if I had spoken in a language he had once known and now hated. "No," he said. "We entered route at 0913. Enemy pursuit on our stern. Shaw was line signals on Terminus. He passed us the Kettering window himself." He tried to rise and failed. "How long since transit?" The west door slammed down behind him. Chapel Junction shook under another impact from the outer hull. "Long enough," I said. "Strip him." My men rolled him, cut the maglocks on his cuirass, and pulled the breastplate free. The suit beneath was old enough to belong in Terminus's museum, but the wear was right, the seals were right, and the padding under it was soaked black at the left side. A jagged length of metal sat below his ribs where something had gone in and stayed there. "Fake suit," one of my guards muttered. I wanted him to be right. A forgery was clean. A forgery meant infiltration, archive theft, morale sabotage. A forgery let me put a category back around the problem and fire accordingly. Porter turned his head toward me with visible effort. "If Shaw's alive, tell him Rourke held the convoy mouth as long as he could. Tell him we came through." He coughed wetly onto the deck. "Move him to triage," I said. "Full restraint. Nobody uses names from the memorial around the prisoners, not one." That was the line I gave my people, and once I said it, I needed it to hold. Stations under siege run on labels: civilian, friendly, hostile, wounded, armed. Once those words start slipping, men die in the space between them. We fell back under fire toward Med, past the chapel doors, old stone and steel from Terminus's first build, past civilians kneeling behind the threshold with blankets over their heads, past a little girl in station grey who looked up at Porter on the gurney and went still with the instinctive stillness children learn before adults admit anything is wrong. Terminus had begun as a trade fort around the Kettering Gate, a transit ring that once threw ships across deep space faster than any drive could manage on its own. The route died in the war before I was born. The Admiralty shut the ring down, built gun batteries around it, and left families on station to man a fortress no one wanted to abandon. My father had served here. My mother was buried here. Most people on Terminus could point into the chapel and find a name that had married itself into their own. Which was why a dead Marine in old armor asking for Lieutenant Shaw was the most dangerous thing I had seen in my life. The medical deck had spilled into the corridor before we reached it. Orderlies worked on the floor. Marines from the station guard held one wall. Security held the other. Blood and antiseptic and hot wiring turned the air metallic. In the middle of it stood Dr. Helen Ward with her sleeves rolled to the shoulder and both forearms red to the elbow. Ward ran medicine on Terminus because nobody else had the skill or temper to do it for long. Mid-50s, compact, iron-backed, impossible to hurry except by catastrophe. This qualified. "What have you brought me?" she asked without looking up from the chest she was sealing. "One of the boarders. That narrows it down to about 60. He says he's Leonard Porter." Ward looked up then. Her eyes moved to the gurney. Disbelief hit first, then attention. She crossed to him, leaned down close enough to study the face, and swore once under her breath. "You know him?" I asked. "I know that face from the archive," she said. "Half this deck does." "Archive theft," I said. "Or deep mask work." "Maybe," she said. She did not say yes. That bothered me more than a denial would have. We pushed him behind a curtain into what passed for an open bay. Ward cut away the last of the suit while I stood at the foot of the gurney with my pistol down by my thigh. Up close the damage was worse. Bruising spread under the skin in dark sheets. A length of hull metal had gone in below the ribs. Heat scoring marked his side where flash had licked through the armor seam. Parts of the suit lining had fused into the wound, which meant some of the damage predated the boarding action. Ward pressed 2 fingers along the margin. Porter came off the table hard enough to rattle the frame. "This should have killed him in under an hour without pressure support," she said. "He crossed 2 decks. That is not an answer. It's the one I have." An orderly hurried in with fresh packs and a portable seal rig. He was young, maybe 20, with the quick hands and hollow eyes of somebody who had learned medicine in shortages. His badge read Aaron Porter. Ward saw it when Porter did. The wounded Marine turned his head. His face emptied. "Porter," he said. "What's your father's name?" Toby froze with the pressure pack half open. "Ben," he said before I could stop him. "Benjamin Porter." Leonard Porter made a sound that belonged to another decade, another whole life. He pushed up on one arm, white with pain. Ben was 6 when I shipped out. His hand shot out and caught Toby's wrist. The guard to my left snapped his rifle up. Toby jerked back on instinct. Instruments clattered. Leonard twisted with him, not attacking, reaching, but in a room already stretched to breaking the difference lasted less than a second. I saw the blade tray. The spooked guard, the other wounded watching, one prisoner up under restraint. I shot Leonard Porter through the chest. The sound slammed off the curtained bay and came back from hard walls. Leonard dropped against the gurney frame. Toby stumbled into the rack behind him and stared at me with his mouth open, not speaking, not breathing right. Ward checked for a pulse she knew she would not find. Then she looked up at me, and a frightening calm settled over her face. "You idiot," she said. "He lunged at Staff. He reached for his son's son. He was under restraint. He was dying." She stood and keyed the memorial archive on a wall slate with blood-slick fingers. Leonard Porter looked back at us from the screen in dress blues, 31 years younger, and exactly the same in every way that mattered. The service line carried the same unit and ship he had given me in the corridor. Do you know how old Benjamin Porter is now? 57. 2 bad knees, ring housing, a granddaughter in school, block 3. The man you just shot left here before Ben lost his baby teeth. My stomach did not turn over. It simply became heavier, as if somebody had poured lead into it. "He could still be an enemy asset," I said. Ward shoved the slate closer. "Then your enemy built him 31 years ago and enrolled him in the Navy." Around us, the ward kept moving because the wounded do not wait for moral clarity. A Marine screamed for another binder. An orderly called for power. Somebody was praying in a whisper behind the next curtain. Toby still had not looked away from Leonard Porter's body. I took the slate, killed the display and tucked it under my arm. Nobody says anything outside this bay. Toby found his voice before Ward did. Sir, not outside this bay. His face changed then. Something shut and hardened in him. Ward stepped close enough that only I heard her. The next hour is where truth matters. The next hour is where people die if command collapses. Your people are shooting patients. A burst of rifle fire cracked from the corridor. Somebody shouted for chapel access, somebody else for more restraints. A guard shoved through the curtain. Lieutenant, more boarders moving on the chapel. That made no tactical sense until I pictured the carved walls and all the names written there. I handed the slate back to Ward. Cover him. With what? She said. I had no answer worth giving. I took Collins and 6 armed men back toward Chapel Junction. He moved beside me like a man who had learned to save breath for the necessary things. You believe her, he said. Yes. He absorbed that for half a second. Then what are we calling them? Hostile until I say different. He looked at me once, hard, then faced front again. He did not argue. The memorial chapel sat in the oldest part of Terminus, real stone from the moon, hauled up when the first fort went in. The rest of the station had changed around it over the decades. Steel skins over old sections, new piping, new bunks, fresh sealant. But the chapel had remained what it was. A room for names and the people who could not let those names go. 3 station guards lay outside the threshold. One boarder lay across the step with half his face gone. Inside, the chamber glowed under prayer lamps and emergency strips. Civilians were packed into the side aisles behind memorial screens and old statuary. 8 boarders in battered navy armor had taken cover among the stone columns. 2 of them stood at the east wall with lamps in hand, reading the carved names as if checking a manifest. Captain James Rourke stood in the center aisle. I knew his face from command hall. His portrait hung outside Shaw's office. Rourke had commanded escort elements on the Kettering withdrawal and vanished with the convoy Terminus had failed to recover. Every officer assigned here learned the story in his first week. The living man in front of me looked older than the portrait only in the ways pain can age a man in a day. One side of his collar had burned through. His left sleeve was dark with blood. He held a rifle in one hand and a memorial guide tablet in the other. He saw me and raised the rifle a fraction, not threatening, only enough to show he could have killed me already if he had wanted the easier version. "Who commands this station?" he asked. His voice carried through the whole chapel. The civilians heard every word. "Commander Victor Shaw," I said. "He's wounded." Something crossed Rourke's face at the name. Relief first, then anger, then a grief so quick another man might have missed it. "I want him." "You boarded a defended fortress and opened fire on station personnel." "I entered a Navy wargate under recall authority and found my own dead on the walls." He lifted the tablet. "Your chapel says I died 31 years ago. My men are bleeding in your shrine. Call Shaw." Collins took cover at the left column. My people spread along the threshold. Nobody fired. The room had gone too strange for clean violence. "You're Captain James Rourke," I said. "I was when I entered route. What was your last order before transit? Hold the Kettering mouth for the convoy. Deny enemy pursuit." His eyes stayed on me. "If Shaw has made commander, then either he did very well, or time has gone wrong. Which is it, Lieutenant?" One of the boarders at the wall turned. "Sir, I found Briggs. Lewis Briggs. Panel 4. Killed in action. Same date as route loss." He looked about 25. His own name was on the wall 2 rows below the one he was touching. A woman behind one of the side screens made a low sound and put both hands over her mouth. I followed her gaze and saw a boarder crouched by the font, with the same face as the framed photo I had passed 100 times in family quarters. The station was splitting open. I could feel the first crack under everything. "Captain," I said, keeping my voice clear enough for my people to hear. "Set your weapons down and release the civilians. You'll get medical treatment." "As prisoners? Under what charge?" "Returning. You boarded a military station. I returned to my own command. You opened fire. Your outer batteries fired first." That was also true. Unregistered ships had come off a dead route and crossed weapons range. The batteries had answered as batteries do. Rourke took one step forward. My men drew beads on him. His men did the same on us. Every rifle in the room found a throat in under a second. "You know who I am," he said. "You know what my men are. Give me medical passage and a live line to shore, and I can keep this room from becoming a slaughter pit." Can, not will. He was offering a bargain and warning me in the same breath. I had enough in front of me to say the word survivors. Enough to tell the truth up and down the chain. Enough to keep the station from shooting its own dead under a bad label. Instead, I heard my own earlier order closing around my throat. Hostile until I say different. If I reversed it here, in front of civilians and shaken security personnel and descendants staring at familiar faces under rifles, the whole line could come apart in a minute. Men with fathers on the wall would stop obeying sectors and start choosing blood. Relief Marines would come into a station where nobody agreed on who counted as enemy. We might get mercy. We would also get collapse. I keyed my wristcom and opened a secure burst to command and the incoming relief. "This is Standish. Border leaders are using verified memorial identities to compromise station cohesion. They hold civilians in the chapel and request access to command. Situation unstable. Recommend continued hostile classification pending containment." Ward had called Leonard Porter real. I knew she was right. I sent the report anyway. Rourke watched my face and understood enough from it. "You bastard," he said. To my right, station guard Paul Denny half-lowered his rifle and stared at the border by the font. "Dad?" he said. The border turned. Somebody fired. I never knew which side. The chapel broke at once. Stone shattered off the column by my cheek. Collins dragged Denny down by the collar before the next burst cut through the space where his head had been. Civilians screamed and dropped between pews. One of Rourke's men fell with his throat opened. A station guard spun against the wall, leaving blood across names carved there generations before either of us had been born. Rourke hauled two civilians behind a memorial screen with one hand, while firing one-handed at the threshold with the other. That image stayed with me later. The dead man from Command Hall, alive in my chapel, saving civilians while I ordered the withdrawal. We sealed the outer doors and left the chapel contested. In the corridor, Collins slapped the emergency lock and turned to me. "Sir, if Rourke is who he says he is still armed." "That isn't what I asked." "No," I said. "It isn't." Relief docked 6 minutes later through Collar 2, the only safe clamp left on the north side. Commodore Alan Wilde came in with Marine sections and a face built for the kind of news most men spend their careers dodging. He commanded the escort group assigned to Terminus's sector, which meant he was accustomed to arriving after disaster and deciding how much truth the structure could absorb. He met me in command while the station guns still traded fire with ships outside. The command center looked through a slab window at the dead gate itself, a great dark ring hanging at the station's heart inside service arms and old armor plating. Men had once trusted that ring to throw them across 100 light years. Now it sat in the middle of Terminus like a sealed wound. Commander Victor Shaw was in the chair because he refused transport deeper into Med unless he stopped breathing first. A fragment had gone through his thigh during the first breach. Ward had sealed it. He sat white-faced and furious, blood seeping through the lower bandage anyway. I gave Wilde the clean version. Unknown ships, identity compromise using archive faces, chapel hostages, movement toward the old gate control sectors. Then Ward came in without invitation, sleeves still red, and put Leonard Porter's archive record on the command table. "He was real," she said. "So are the others. Wilde looked at the image, then at me. Shaw closed his eyes for one hard second. "Explain," Wilde said. I gave him the rest because there was no point trimming it any further inside that room. Porter in the corridor, Porter in med, Rourke in the chapel, the memorial names, my classification order, the shooting. Wilde listened without moving his face. When I finished, he said, "Proof beyond faces." "We captured one assault craft in Bayhold," I said. "If the logs survived, we'll know." Then no. The craft was Old Navy issue from the same era as the uniforms, scorched half to ruin and somehow still operational. Wilde sent Marines. I went with Ward and Jasper Boone, Terminus's senior systems man, a thin civilian technician who understood the Dead Gate's hardware better than anyone left alive. Boone cracked the pilot core. The log came up in damaged fragments. "Launch from cruiser Ashford," he read. "Route entry through Kettering Ring, pursuit contact, hull breach Q3, internal elapsed time since entry." He stopped, blinked, checked the line again. 4 hours, 17 minutes. Ward rested one bloody hand against the assault craft as if steadying herself against motion. Boone kept reading. "External sync lost at route collapse. Drift state. Reacquisition on local gravity reference." He looked up. "Today." He turned slowly toward the dead assault craft. The route never finished spitting them out. It held them somewhere inside transit and dumped them when the corridor finally failed. Most officers learned enough gate theory to fear it, and stopped there. Boone knew the ugly parts. A gate route did not carry a ship the way an engine did. It forced one fixed ring to answer another across folded space. If the path failed badly enough, ships could be torn apart, scattered, or thrown out of alignment with local time. We taught the risk as theory and nightmare. None of us expected it to walk onto the station under arms and ask for Shaw by his junior rank. "The injuries," Ward said. "That's why they're wrong. Bodies and damage came out of sync. Some of the trauma arrived with them. Some is still catching up." "Can you keep them alive?" Wilde asked. "Some. If your Marines stop treating medbays like holding pens." Wilde turned to me. "How far has this spread?" "Chapel. Medical. If they push East Service, the old annex, we still hold core routes." "How many know what they are?" "Enough to break confidence if the word runs loose." Ward stared at him. "You are not about to bury this." Wilde met her without heat. "Doctor, I am about to secure a fortress station under active assault by armed personnel from a lost campaign who believe the war continues. Once I have the station, I will sort legal status, medical claim, and notification. Before that, I need one chain of command and one set of fire rules." Ward looked to Shaw. Shaw's face had gone older in the last hour. "Owen," he said, "can you restore chapel and block gate control?" "Yes." "Do it." Ward swung toward him. "Victor, listen to yourself." He looked at her with a tiredness deeper than pain. "If Rourke opens that ring, I may get another convoy pouring into a station already breaking apart. Or survivors. Armed survivors," Wilde said. That was the truth that kept rescuing my worst choice. Rourke was real, and he was still conducting an armed seizure of critical infrastructure. Every time I reached for mercy, the tactical fact stood up and demanded its due. We set the order there. Hostile combatants, pending containment. I signed it. Wilde countersigned. Shaw approved from the chair. Ward left without saluting. Within the hour, Med turned from crowded to hellish. I went back because I needed to see what my order was doing. Ward had divided the ward into 3 lanes: station wounded, border wounded under guard, and a last row for the men whose bodies had started losing the argument with time. One of Rourke's Marines lay strapped to a frame, while old shrapnel began surfacing along his abdomen, working toward the skin as if some unseen hand were finishing an injury postponed half a lifetime. Another man sat upright asking for water and then folded with a soft, wet crack when a fracture across the shoulder chose that minute to complete itself. It was not magic. That made it worse. It was deferred ruin finishing its work. Toby Porter still moved among the cots. He passed instruments, applied pressure, read monitors, looked everywhere except the alcove where Leonard Porter lay under a sheet. When he saw me, his face gave nothing away. "Report," I said to Ward. 9 boarders alive and treatable, 6 beyond me. 12 station wounded I can save if power stays on. 3 guards refusing duty because they recognized family names in the prisoner line. She did not look away from my face. "Toby has not left the floor since you killed his grandfather." Toby's hands kept moving. "My grandfather died before I was born, sir." Ward said, "There's your station in 1 sentence." The internal comm crackled. Then Rourke's voice came over every local speaker on the deck. "This is Captain James Rourke, Convoy Escort Command. Any personnel on Terminus bearing the names Porter, Denny, Briggs, Hale, Morrison or Shaw, hear me. We returned under Navy orders through Kettering route. We are wounded and under fire. If your family records list us among the lost, the record is wrong. Bring medpacks if you can. Stand clear of Marines if you cannot." He had the memorial register. He was using it exactly as I had feared. The deck changed around the words. A maintenance woman started crying without sound while pressing on a guard's wound. A Marine cursed and looked toward the door as if family might walk through it at any second. Toby stopped moving. Ward said quietly, "You still think delay helps?" The answer was no. I still delayed. Rourke took the old command annex before evening cycle. The annex was a sealed operations block from the gate's active days, connected by service tunnels to the chamber under the ring. We kept it closed except for inspection, because most of its controls no longer led anywhere. That made it perfect ground for men trained on the old layout, and desperate enough to make dead systems matter again. Wild wanted an immediate assault. I asked for Parley first. Maybe I wanted to repair the thing I had broken in the chapel. Maybe I wanted to hear Rourke refuse in terms so absolute I could call the blood that followed unavoidable. Either way, Wild gave me 20 minutes and 1 Marine squad staged out of sight. I went through Maintenance Crawl 12 with Collins at my shoulder. He had a fresh bandage around his left forearm from the chapel. He noticed me looking at it. "Still works," he said. That was not concern. That was inspection. "Liar." It was the sort of exchange men use when they do not want to say, "I know where this is going and I'm walking in anyway." The annex was all old stone, thick housings, brass plates rubbed dull by hands dead before my birth. Rourke had posted men at every choke point, and everyone had chosen the correct angle on instinct. They belonged in the space more naturally than I did. That fact irritated me because it felt too much like judgment. Rourke waited in the central planning room with 2 Marines from his command and 1 station civilian beside him in maintenance coveralls. Miriam Denny, Paul's aunt, lift technician from ring housing. Her brother's memorial name was on the chapel wall with the others from Kettering. She looked at me with open contempt. "You gave him no choice," she said before I spoke. "Mrs. Denny, step away from armed personnel. My father is one of your armed personnel." Rourke lifted a hand. She fell silent, though not with obedience, only because she trusted him more than she hated me. "Lieutenant Standish," Rourke said. "You came in person. Good. I came because we're out of room for mistakes. You were out before you shot Leonard Porter." So he knew already. The dead were becoming current intelligence faster than I could seal anything. "I'm here to offer terms," I said. "So am I." Rourke set a data chip on the planning table. "Play it." I did not move. He nodded to one of his men who keyed the wall display. Old command footage filled the screen. Grainy, damaged. Terminus's gate chamber 31 years earlier, less armoured, more crowded, alive with crews. A younger Victor Shaw stood at a signal station in White's. Beside him, Station Commander Arthur Warren, whose portrait still hung outside the chapel, listened to a headset and then cut the line himself. The audio cleaned just enough. Convoy elements still inside route, an off-screen voice said. Warren answered, collapse the window. Sir, escort requests another 90 seconds. Enemy pursuit is on the mouth. Collapse it now. The image shook as somebody turned. Young Shaw looked sick. Warren did not. The feed ended. Rourke watched me absorb it. Your station buried us by order. Then it carved our names into stone and taught your children we died clean. I kept my face still with effort. You are still armed inside a fortress under emergency defense. Because the first people I met on my way home fired on me. You boarded in assault formation. I came through into weapons range under pursuit from a war that had not ended for me. He pointed toward the floor under our boots. That ring may still hold other ships. My convoy scattered on entry. I want medical passage, recognition of lawful status, and control access to reopen the route long enough to search. The route. Even dead, even wounded, the gate at Terminus's heart remained the fastest way to turn one disaster into 10. If you touch that ring, I said, you could rip this station apart. If I leave it shut, I leave my people in there. Your people may already be dead. He came around the table then, close enough that I could see burst vessels in one eye and the drag in his left leg he was refusing to acknowledge. Lieutenant, almost everyone I know has been dead for 3 decades by your calendar. I walked into a chapel and found my own name on the wall. I have accepted more in one day than your station has managed in 31 years. Do not ask me to abandon the last men I might still bring back because your command structure prefers them absent. That was the strongest thing anybody had said to me all day, and I hated him for making it stronger by being right. I also saw the other truth standing beside it. If I handed route access to James Rourke, he would open a failed transit path under battle logic, with wounded men, panicked descendants, and a fortress already breaking down the middle. He would do it out of duty and love. He would still kill us with it. Stand down, your armed men, I said. Release the annex. Let Ward treat your wounded. Then we assess the route under controlled conditions. Under Wild's Marines? Under station and fleet oversight. He gave me a look that was almost pity. You still think you can file the human part afterward. That was the moment the last lies stripped off. Until then I had been telling myself I was protecting the station. I was. But not only that, I was also protecting the structure that kept my earlier decision from becoming fully visible. If I yielded to him now, then Leonard Porter was not a tragic necessity in a ward under pressure. He was the first murder in a chain. I had already signaled Collins before entering. If Rourke refused, assault teams would breach on my mark. Insurance, I had called it. Standing there, thumb on the wrist stud, I knew better. Miriam Denny saw my hand move. No, she said. I pressed. The annex blew apart into smoke and noise. Charges went at both rear access doors. Relief Marines came through shattered paneling. One of Rourke's men died before he got his rifle up. Miriam threw herself behind the table. Collins shouted for surrender and had to dive sideways when the old Navy Marines answered with disciplined crossfire from the far consoles. This was the part of battle where orders become weather. Men hear the first word and lose the second. One boarder on the left threw both hands up and shouted compliance code from an obsolete manual. A relief Marine shot him through the mouth because he did not know the code, and the man was still standing. Rourke came across the table at me as the first burst hit the wall display. His hand hit my shoulder plate and spun me. We went down together. For a second, we were 2 officers from related centuries trying to kill or save each other by the same training. You promised Parley, he said. I drove my pistol into his ribs and he rolled off, slowed more by his existing wounds than by the blow. Collins moved to cover me and took a burst through the lower side. He slammed against a console, dropped to one knee and kept firing. Nate! I'm working, he gritted out. Rourke tore a heavy iron release key from a shattered manual box. He had planned for this. Of course he had. He broke for the lower access with 2 surviving Marines around him. I had one line on him. Collins lunged up to cut him off. My round went wide into the wall. When the smoke thinned, The annex was ours, and the route to the gate chamber was not. Collins lay near the lower hatch with both hands pressed to his side. Blood had spread under him in a dark fan. I dropped beside him. "You stupid bastard," he said. "You knew in chapel." I opened a field seal and pressed it into his hands. He let me, mostly because he lacked the strength to stop me. "You knew before chapel," he said. His eyes stayed on mine, clear, furious, trusted long enough to make the judgment hurt. "Then why'd you keep the word?" He meant hostile. He meant the label I had used to hold the line, and then to excuse myself while I broke the thing the line was supposed to protect. "Because I thought if I held control for one more hour," I said, "I could still choose the truth later." He laughed once, small and ugly. "There isn't any later now." He died before Ward could reach him. Rourke got to the gate chamber with 3 men, 1 badly injured station civilian, and the manual key. He also had something worse than access. He had every reason left in the world to believe I would rather kill him than hear him. The gate chamber sat 4 decks below command in a cylindrical well cut around the ring itself. Service bridges crossed the void. Old control nests clung to the walls. The ring filled the center like a moon of black metal, 30 meters wide, scarred by the same war that had trapped Rourke inside it. Anchor charges were bolted around the outer mounts, demolition packs meant to break the gate beyond recovery if enemy capture ever became certain. I went down with Wilde's Marines, 2 station guards, Boone and Ward, because she refused to stay behind, while men she might still save crawled toward disaster. A fragment from the annex had cut under my shoulder plate. I had wrapped it badly. The arm still worked. Rourke had already opened the lower maintenance shutters by the time we reached the top bridge. Broken lines of light were waking across the ring's inner surface. Not bright, just enough to show movement, where no movement should have been. Boone looked over the rail and went pale. "He's forcing a partial wake," he said. "Control spine's dead, but the old route memory may still answer. If it catches even a fragment of a live path." "What happens?" Wilde asked. "It tries to finish what it started." Below us, Rourke stood at the primary manual pedestal with one hand on the lever and the other braced on the housing. One of his Marines lay dead on the steps. The second sat against the wall, trying and failing to hold his neck closed. Miriam Denny lay by the auxiliary panel with her leg wrapped and splinted badly. She looked up when she saw us and shut her eyes once, as if the rest had become obvious. "Rourke!" I shouted. He looked up. Blood had dried across half his face. "You got here. Step away from the ring." I already opened the memory. The broken lines brightened. For one heartbeat I saw the bow of a ship inside the darkness, then only black again. Not a vision, not a ghost, a real hull trying to arrive through a route that no longer existed. "There are contacts," Boone whispered. "Multiple. God." The floor shook. One service arm locked around the ring sheared free and dropped into the well with a crash that came up through my boots. Ward moved to the rail beside me. "There are men still in there." "There may be wreckage," Wilde said. "There are transponders." Rourke heard that and bared his teeth in something that wasn't a smile. "You hear her, Standish? They're here." Then the chamber started paying the debt. The wounded Marine at Rourke's feet jerked and split along an old chest wound that had not been open a second earlier. Blood hit the pedestal. Miriam cried out and dragged herself backward. Across the chamber, fresh gouges ripped into a maintenance rail as if an impact from another hour of another battle had finally chosen to arrive. Boone caught my sleeve. "The route is unloading stored damage into local matter, hull stress, body stress, deferred impact. If he keeps drawing on it, this chamber starts inheriting the convoy's history." There it was in plain language. The ring was making the past land all at once. "Cut it," Wilde said. "Remote cut's dead," Boone answered. "Manual only. Lower pedestal." Which meant Rourke. I started for the stairs. Wilde grabbed my arm. "We can put rounds on him from here." "And if he dies on the lever in the wrong state?" Wilde let go. He had no better answer. I went down one flight with my empty hand raised and the other bleeding through the wrap. The chamber had a new sound now, deep structural groaning from the ring mount and the ticking spit of stress fractures opening in old metal. A service panel burst along a seam and flung shards through the stairwell. One Marine behind me swore and went down, clutching his cheek. "Rourke," I said. "Listen." He gave a breathless laugh. "Now?" "Yes, now." He kept one hand on the lever. The glow within the ring shifted, and for an instant the buoy reappeared. Destroyer lines, forward breach, something strapped behind it. "I can record your status here," I said. "Open channel, full witness. Survivors of Kettering convoy returned by transit failure. Medical priority, official recognition." "Official recognition." He looked up toward the station seal cut into the chamber wall, then back at me. "You killed Leonard Porter as a hostile combatant. You used Parley to place assault teams. You still think words at the end balance the books?" "No." I took another step down. "I think it's the last thing left I can still say honestly. That honesty was due daylight hours ago." He was right in a way that stripped every defense I had kept standing. I went down another stair. "If there are more ships in there," I said, "you may bring them through into a broken ring with no receiving route, no dock space, and Marines on every bridge. You'll kill this station, and maybe them with it." "And if I leave them?" There was no answer that gave his missing people dignity, only the answer that preserved the living. "You leave them where war and time already trapped them." He nodded once, almost gently, as if I had finally stopped hiding behind process and said the thing plainly. Miriam Denny hauled herself up on one elbow. "James," she said, "don't." He looked at her, then at the gate. In that second I saw him completely at last. The officer who had held a convoy mouth open under pursuit, the survivor thrown forward into a future that had buried him, the commander who no longer trusted the men above him because I had spent every available hour teaching him not to. He pulled the lever farther. The chamber convulsed. The bow of a destroyer shoved out of darkness and stopped halfway through the ring, trapped between arrival and wreck. Metal screamed along the support arms. One bridge segment tore loose and spun down into the shaft. On the forward breach I saw bodies in harness, dead, dying, or preserved in some worse middle state. One arm moved. It clawed once at empty air. Boone shouted from above, "Anchor charge window is collapsing." If I wanted the demolition packs, I had seconds. I ran. Wild shouted for covering fire. Ward screamed something I lost under the noise. I hit the lower platform as one of Rourke's last Marines raised his rifle from behind the pedestal housing. I shot him twice and kept moving. Rourke swung toward me with the iron key in one hand. He was slower than he had been in the annex. Blood loss and accumulated damage had finally taken their share. We hit each other beside the pedestal. The key smashed my forearm. My pistol went over the rail. I drove my shoulder into his chest and slammed him against the housing. He struck back with brutal precision, hand under my jaw, knee toward my thigh, elbow across the wound in my shoulder. We fought like men taught by the same dead institution. "Let go," I said. "Help me hold it." The destroyer shoved another meter through and peeled farther open along old damage lines. More bodies showed in the breach. One moved again. That settled it. If more came through, Terminus became a slaughterhouse with legal next of kin attached to every corpse. I rammed Rourke back against the housing, reached past him, and slapped open the anchor charge cover. The arming wheel needed 2 full turns. My torn shoulder nearly failed on the first. I got the second with both hands and felt the lock bite. Rourke understood before I reached for the trigger bar. His face changed then. Not into rage, into something quieter and much worse. He looked from the half-emerged destroyer to me, and in that look I saw every man still trapped in the route, every year stolen from him, every bad choice I had made since Chapel Junction. "You would rather kill us all than let us come home," he said. "No," I told him. "I would rather have told the truth before I made you impossible to save." It was the truest sentence I had spoken all day. It saved nothing. He lunged for the trigger with me. We hit it together. Anchor charges blew around the ring in a chain of white light. The first blast cracked the inner surface. The second tore one side of the mount free. The third broke the gate into great sections and hurled them outward through support arms and chamber wall. The route's collapse answered with a violent pressure surge, not full vacuum, more the shove of a system failing faster than seals could keep up. Air and rubble roared past. I caught the pedestal frame with one hand and lost the skin off 2 fingers doing it. Rourke vanished into light and wreckage. When I woke, I was on the lower platform with blood in my mouth and foam drifting down from ruptured suppression lines. The gate was no longer a gate. Jagged segments hung twisted in the well, lit by emergency lamps and fire. Somebody was shouting my name from the stairs. Ward reached me first and dropped to her knees in the rubble. Her hands were furious and exact. "Stay with me," she said. "I'm here." "Good. Continue." I looked toward the pedestal. Nothing there was whole enough to name. I looked toward Miriam Denny and saw Marines carrying her up on a field board, alive, face grey, one hand over her eyes. Wilde came down with Boone behind him. He took in the chamber in one sweeping glance. "The route is dead," Boone said. His voice shook. "Completely dead." Wilde nodded once. "Then we can still hold the station." Ward turned on him with murder in her face. "Still hold your station. Listen to yourself." He took the blow without answering. They moved me to med, surgery, pain control, bright hard fatigue. When I woke for good, the station had gone quiet in the way only damaged places do. No active gunfire, no boarding alarms, only repair crews somewhere down corridor and the intermittent roll of a stretcher. Ward sat at the end of my bed with a cup in one hand and my confession slate in the other. "You lived," she said. "For now. You'll keep the arm if infection stays off it. Collins died. Wilde held the line. Shaw is stable. Miriam Denny lost the leg below the knee. Toby Porter asked for transfer off your deck. I approved it. That hurt more cleanly than the rest, though I had no right to say so." Ward set the slate on my blanket. "Wilde wants your after-action report in an hour. He also wants to discuss classification language before you submit." I knew what that meant before she finished. "He offered you the clean version," she said. I nodded. The clean version was simple. Unknown hostile ships. Identity fraud using recovered archival data. Borders neutralized while attempting illegal activation of derelict gate infrastructure. Station preserved through decisive action. Dead remain dead. Institutions remain intact. Families keep their stories. Ward watched my face. "What will you write?" I looked past her toward the corridor that led 3 turns later to the memorial chapel. Somewhere beyond it, stonecutters would already be assessing damage from the firefight. Names would need repair. Perhaps that had always been Terminus's trade. Damage first, carving later. "I'll write what happened," I said. Ward leaned back and shut her eyes once. "Good. Does good still exist in this story?" "No," she said, "but accurate does." Wilde met me in command because he preferred hard conversations in rooms built for power. Shaw was there too, white with pain, one leg stretched on a support frame. Beyond the slab window, the broken gate hung in twisted sections lit by work lamps. Terminus had lost the thing that justified its position. What remained was a fortress with no root and a history nobody could bury again. Wilde stood with his hands behind his back. "If you file the return personnel as authenticated survivors, you will trigger inheritance review, pension investigations across 3 decades of routine payments, command scrutiny on archival suppression, and a public inquiry into Terminus's closure of Kettering route. You will also place your own actions under direct criminal review." "Yes." Shaw spoke before Wilde could continue. "Owen, listen. The men who came through were ours. I know that now in ways I should have known sooner. But the station survives because you broke the ring when you did. The station survives because I made sure Rourke had no reason to trust a word I said by the time I needed him to." Shaw looked at me. and for a moment I could see the young signal officer from the recovered footage under the old man's face. "Warren gave the closure order," he said. "I passed it." That was the first time he had admitted his place in the original burial. "You built your life after it," I said. "So did everyone here." Wilde slid a prepared report form towards me. The first line already read, "Hostile actors." I left it where it was. "My report will identify Captain James Rourke and all recovered personnel as lawful Navy survivors returned by transit failure from the Kettering convoy loss," I said. "It will state that I maintained hostile classification after credible proof because I believed command cohesion required it. It will state that I used Parley to position assault teams. It will state that the destruction of the gate prevented further uncontrolled returns and also destroyed any remaining personnel still trapped en route." Wilde studied me for a long time. "That report ends your career." "I know. It may end this station." I looked through the slab at the broken gate. "The station already ended. We just haven't finished saying it plainly." Nobody argued after that. The inquiry began before the chamber was fully cleared. My command authority was suspended the same day my report went out. Wilde kept me on Terminus as liaison and witness, partly because shipping me off before the first hearings would have looked too much like convenience, and partly, I think, because some part of him believed a man should remain in the place he had ruined. Families came to the chapel over the next week in numbers we had not seen since founding day. Some came to rage, some to pray, some to look at names that had changed meaning under their feet. Toby Porter came with his father, Benjamin, a broad, tired man in his 50s, whose knees had indeed gone bad. Benjamin stood before Leonard Porter's carved name for a long time without speaking. He did not ask to see me. Toby did. He found me in the side passage outside the chapel, wearing station grey instead of medic white. "My father wants to know if his father said anything else," he said. I gave him every word Leonard Porter had spoken in the corridor and the ward. I did not improve any of it. I did not soften any of it. Toby listened with his arms folded tight across his chest. "He came back for 4 hours," Toby said when I finished. "That's all the world gave him." He held my eyes. "And you still made it smaller." He nodded once, as if confirming a measurement, and walked away. Terminus entered evacuation status 2 weeks later. Without the gate, it was too expensive to maintain as a fortress at that position, and too compromised by inquiry to preserve as a symbolic post. Families received transfer orders. The school shut down. The market deck emptied. Cargo lifts carried out furniture, shrine boxes, children's lockers, and 3 generations' worth of proof that people had lived on a grave and called it home. I remained for the last phase because the chapel had to be amended, and there were questions only I could answer about where each man had fallen. Stonecutters came up from the moon with portable rigs and patient faces. They repaired the chips in the wall, cleaned blood from the lower panels, and then did the work that made the whole disaster final. They carved second dates beside names that had already been marked lost. Leonard Porter, James Rourke, Lewis Briggs, the others from the route, men who had been mourned once, returned under arms and died again before the station that had buried them learned how to speak honestly. Paul Denny's father was among them. So was Nate Collins, on a newer panel near the security wall. Rourke's line eventually received a note beneath the dates. Returned in service. That took 3 committees, 2 legal challenges, and more effort than it should have taken to win a man the dignity of an accurate sentence. It was the least I could manage for him. The rest I had broken with my own hands. On the last day before decommission lock, I stood alone in the chapel while the cure lights on the fresh stone cooled. The room looked almost peaceful again if a man chose to ignore what peace had cost. My mother's name remained in the Guild family section. Collins had his own panel now. Rourke's line carried both dates and that final note beneath. I put my hand on the stone. It was cool, solid, and indifferent to what men called honor. At Chapel Junction, I had told myself names were tools. Friendly, hostile, dead, living. Hold the line with the right word and the rest could be sorted later. I had been wrong in the oldest way a fortress man can be wrong. I believed the wall existed to protect the truth inside it. In the end, the wall protected only the time it took to decide which truth would be buried next. The station survived. The gate did not. The men from Kettering came home long enough to learn what had been done with their absence, and I met them with rifles, sealed orders, and one last act of demolition when Mercy had become too dangerous to trust. That was what my decisions earned me. When I left the chapel, I shut the doors carefully behind me and locked them by hand, because some places deserve at least that much respect after you have turned them into tombs twice.